Hello, here's problem 5 about contains 1 or 3. So, a couple of comments. First, this was my fault. I named this method extremely poorly. The problem statement says that the method should return true if the array contains no numbers 1 or 3. However, the name of this method implies that if it's returning true, then it does contain a 1 or a 3. So that's incredibly confusing. So if the method was supposed to test whether it doesn't contain a 1 or a 3, I suggest that we rename the method, we could rename it doesn't contain 1 or 3, or we could call it contains no 1 or 3. I think I like doesn't contain 1 or 3 better. So let's do that. So that's my fault. Sorry, everybody. This is somebody's solution, and before we even look at how their method works, I want to say, first of all, good work on making some test cases to run it, but this is kind of a weird way to do it. Here's why. Notice that we've got the method here, but we're running the method on this weird object called R. Like, what is this object R? Here it says array R equals new array. But like, why are we making something called array? Because it seems like this is our array. So what's going on here? Here's the answer. They've named their class array. And this method is not static. And what it means that if a method isn't static, that means you have to create an object in order to run it. I can't just run the method by itself like this. However, this is what I want to be able to do, because you don't want to make an object unless your object actually represents something. And there's nothing that this represents. Like, we're not trying to model a particular type of entity. We just want to be able to run this method right here. So the solution to all of this is make your method static, which means that you don't need an object to run it. You can just run it by yourself. It's like a library method. And then we don't need to create an object, and then we don't need an object to actually run the method. So this is sort of the right way to test your things. All right, cool. So let's look and see what their solution looks like, and then let's look at my favorite solution. So doesn't contain 1 or 3. So by default, we're saying true. That means sort of yes, it doesn't contain a 1 or a 3. So then they loop through the entire list, and if we see a 1 or if we see a 3, then let's say false. So what does false mean? False means it's not true that it doesn't contain a 1 or a 3, which is what we'd want. If it's not true that it doesn't contain 1, then that must mean it does contain 1. And it makes sense to do that because we just saw 1 here. Okay, and then they use this statement called break, which you might not know about. Break sort of exits you from whatever whatever loop you're inside of right now. And then they return yes or no. All right, so I think that you should almost never use the break statement. That's why I didn't teach it to you. So I think what's a little bit better is let's do this. Let's loop over every element. Let's say if we see a 1 or a 3, then right away we know it's not true that the list doesn't contain 1, because we saw 1. Therefore, it can't be true that it doesn't contain 1. So I just want to return false right away. I'm going to return false because we saw a 1 or 3. Therefore, not true that list doesn't contain 1. All right. So some people wrote an else condition here where they said otherwise return true. This is a very important bug. What this means is that we never actually look at any numbers except the first one. Because if the first one is a 1 or a 3, we return false. If the first one is anything else, we immediately return true. And returning true means we're saying, yes, this does not contain a 1 or a 3. But we wouldn't know the answer to that question yet because we've only looked at one of the numbers. You got to loop through all the rest of the numbers before you can confidently say that the list contains no 1s or 3s. So the point is, if you have return statements in your if and your else, that means you immediately return no matter what, and you never get a chance to loop through the rest of your numbers. So it's okay to return immediately if we see one of these things, because then we can immediately say, yes, we're sure that the list, we're sure that it's not true that the list doesn't contain 1 or 3. How can we be so sure? Because we just saw one. Otherwise, you got to wait until the very, very end. So if we loop through the entire list and we've never returned false, that must mean that we've never seen a 1 or a 3. Therefore, we can conclude that the list didn't contain any. Therefore, it's safe to return true at the very, very end. Return true because we never saw a 1 or 3. So this is my preferred solution to this problem. Okay, let's do another one.